I'd like to call the Monday, February the 26th, 2018 Blue Springs Planning Commission meeting to order. And please ask if you would rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, I'd like to welcome all of you tonight, excuse me, and those also watching. What we have tonight is we have the consent agenda. Number 2 is the public hearing for the Unified Development Code text amendment. 3 is the public hearing for Southwest Park, and the applicant has requested for that to be continued to Monday, March the 12th. Followed by number 4, we'll have the review of the draft of the 2017 Annual Planning Commission report, and followed by adjournment. So with that, I would entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Peel?
I move that the minutes from February 12th be approved as submitted by staff.
I've heard a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Fairbanks. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. All right, number 2 is a public hearing and for the Unified Development Code, and since it is a public hearing, I still need to open the public hearing for the Unified Development Code text UDC-02-18-6233. And let me give you the procedures since it is a public hearing. I call for exhibits from our city attorney. Staff will make their presentation. I'll ask for applicants and those witnesses in favor, opposed. We'll have a general discussion. I'll close the public hearing and then we'll vote and we'll make our recommendation to the City Council. So with that, I would ask the attorney to please read the exhibits.
Madam Chairman, I offer the following exhibits into the record. Exhibit 1, staff report with attachments. Exhibit 2, affidavit of publication in the Examiner on February 10, 2018. Exhibit 3, application with attachments. Exhibit 4, Title 4, Land Use Section, Blue Springs Code of Ordinances by reference. And Exhibit 5, 2014 Comprehensive Plan by reference.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wright, this is yours, right?
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Banks and Commissioners. Before this evening are several proposed text amendments to the 2015 UDC. This is the 4th round of modifications to come before you since the UDC went into effect in October 2015. There are 11 sections that are being amended, and I'll walk through each of those sections and highlight the major changes for you. So the first section, there's actually 3 sections that are being amended. Sections 403.050G, section 406.080, and section 406.050. The first section here, I should mention all 3 of these sections are related to staff requesting to remove the development and maintenance agreement requirement that was built into the UDC over the past 2 years. Which requires long-term maintenance of public infrastructure on the property. So the first section makes some changes to the language, adding, removing the development and maintenance agreements references, but adding much of the same language that we've been putting in development and maintenance agreements over the last 2 years. Instead of having every development have a separate agreement, it just makes more sense to remove that and have that language put into the code, so that way we don't have to have a separate agreement with every developer. These agreements just run, or the code runs with the property. And this does, the proposed language does address the long-term maintenance of developments that follow the completion of the subdivision. A lot of time the agreements that we have really are just with the initial developer. So whenever the subdivision is complete, they tend to leave or turn the HOA over to the homeowners. This helps ensure that the homeowners, property owners, help maintain that the infrastructure over the long term. So a lot of the language is just cleaning up addressing the languages from the development and maintenance agreement and adding that. The biggest section is here in 406-080A3, which outlines the responsibilities of future property owners. In this situation, it's designed to encourage homeowners to work together to continue to maintain the property owners association agreements that they have, to maintain their, for example, detention basins, common tracks, common amenities that are on the site, and then there are some, it does lay out, if that is not done, how that does get completed by the city and how that will be addressed financially. And again, a lot of this is just changing, removing the term property owners association and just referring to it as association. So there's just some language cleanup here, and then also allowing the director of community development and or the director of public works to address these issues. Going down to the next section, which is section 4 with the land use table. There's actually 3 modifications here to the land use table. The first 2 include adding 2 new use categories. One is for tobacconists and one is for body art service. And then the other item is adding an additional zoning district to the vehicle repair general use. So the first item is the tobacconist and the tobacconist, which I'll get into more detail here in a minute, but we are proposing to add this new use and permit that via conditional use permit in the general business and the regional commercial zoning districts, and the same would apply to the body art service use. And then for vehicle repair general, currently that's allowed by conditional use permit in a light industrial district and by right in a heavy industrial district. We are requesting to add that as a conditional use permit in the regional commercial zoning district as well. And the next section there, 5, explains the reasoning for allowing that by a conditional use permit in the regional commercial zoning district. That would only be permitted when it is tied to an outdoor sales and service equipment use, which is most commonly a vehicle sales use. And the reason for that is a lot of the vehicle sales uses have vehicle repair on site. Most of them they're limited uses, but if they were wanted to have a higher intensity body shop associated with that, if they're making significant alterations to vehicles, they could do that with a conditional use permit as an accessory to the vehicle sales use. The next section, section 6, we did send out a memo on this later this afternoon, and this has been included in the packet as well. First, we would be defining these 2 uses for body art service and tobacconist. We would add these to section 411.030, which are the use groups and definitions of uses. So we've added the tobacconist use to the retail commercial use group, and we've added the body art service use to the service entertainment use group. So the tobacconist definition would be a commercial establishment primarily for the sale of tobacco-related products, which it would include cigarettes, cigars, pipe tobacco, loose tobacco, cigarette papers and pipes, and would also include electronic and vapor cigarettes. And then body art service would be defined as a facility that engages in the activity of tattooing and body piercing as defined and regulated by the state of Missouri. But this does not include a facility that only conducts ear piercings and physicians who perform body art procedures as part of a patient treatment. So going down to the next section, and I'll jump into the memo that was sent out this afternoon. This was taken to the Public Safety Citizens Advisory Board back in January for input from them. There has been interest recently. We've heard it at area plan meetings. We've heard it the Spirit organization that is working with the Human Relations Commission and the mayor also have mentioned this through their public input processes. So This is something that a number of different citizens and organizations have expressed interest in looking at additional limitations on these two uses. So we did put together information for the Public Safety Citizens Advisory Board back in January. The first page here is a map of the current uses and where they're located. Sorry, let me zoom out here. So the green push pins are where there are existing tattoo parlors or body art services is what we're referring to them now. And then the red push pins are where there are currently tobacconist shops. The red areas that are highlighted, those are our TIF districts, and some of those already have limitations on these uses being within them. So it kind of gives you a layout, an idea of where these uses currently are. A lot of them are primarily concentrated along 7 Highway, with a few on 40 Highway, and then there's one up here on Woods Chapel. So staff did, the business services staff did put together a list of all the existing businesses that fall into these categories. There are currently 7 tattoo shops or body art services, and then there are currently 5 tobacconists. And I will mention with the tobacconists, this is only for standalone tobacco shops. It does not include pharmacies or retail stores or grocery stores that also sell tobacco. That is just considered an accessory, sort of an accessory use within that business. But this would be purely just for standalone if that is their primary business model that they have. So staff did look into some other area cities to see what regulations they had on these two uses. Independence and Raytown were the only 2 cities that we looked at that currently do have restrictions. Staff also looked at Lee Summit, Liberty, Leawood, Lenexa, and Shawnee, and they did not have any restrictions. So with that, with conversation with the Public Safety Citizens Advisory Board, they did like the regulations that Independence has and wanted to kind of model the Blue Springs changes off of that. So that's where we get the memo, or where we get the restrictions that we are proposing. So back up to the memo here, section 405.050, this is where we have all of the special use standards for items that require conditional use permits or additional levels of review. So we've added 2 new sections, section 32 and section 33. Section 32 would be the tobacconist section, 33 would be the body art service section. Pretty much the first section of those 2 sections is identical. It would limit these uses. They would not be allowed within 500 feet of any residential use, church, school, or park. And then for the second section, it better defines the number of permits that would be issued based on our population. This is similar to what we already have with the payday loan services, where we've limited that to, I believe, 1 establishment per 4,500 people based on our population. So we would be limiting tobacconists to 1 establishment per 8,000 people, and then for body art service, it would be 1 establishment per 15,000 people. And so based on the current count that we have, our current population, we would allow up to 6 tobacconists. We currently have 5, so there would be the option of having 1 more. And then for body art services, we would only be limiting them to 3. We currently have 7. So that would be one where there would be no additional body art services permitted at this time. So the next section is related to fencing. This came up here at the Planning Commission last year with the Tequesta Village proposal. There was interest amongst both the developer and adjacent property owners on the installation of an 8-foot fence, but under the current code, fences in all residential districts, regardless of regardless of density, are limited to 6 feet. So staff is requesting to alter that and cross out residential and just require that, limit the 6-foot fencing to 2-family and less intensive zoning districts. So 2-family and single-family zoning districts would be the only places where they would have a 6-foot maximum. Everybody else, including multifamily, would have an 8-foot maximum. And then one other section of the fence code that is being requested to change. Currently, our standards require that all finished side of fences face, all fences, if they are, the finished side has to face the adjacent properties. That's created some issues in the past, especially when there's 2 fences going up against one another. You can't get the supports constructed properly without setting it back, which then leaves gaps in between fences where we have maintenance issues. So in situations where the fence is not facing public right-of-way, we would like to remove that requirement. Still, when it faces public right-of-way, the finished side does need to face out, so it still has that aesthetic look to it. But again, if it's facing an interior fence or a neighbor's fence, we'd like to remove that requirement. For item number 9 here is from section 405.020, which is our residential building types. And this is strictly for the apartment complex building type. This is the only building type where the minimum side yard setback is based on the percentage of the lot width. We'd like to remove that, as that can create an issue if you have a large one-lot apartment complex and you have a 20% setback that's required. So, for example, if you have a 500-foot wide frontage for a one-lot apartment complex, you would be required a 50-foot setback on either side. And so rather than having it based on the percentage of the lot, we'd like to remove that and leave it at 10-foot minimum side setback, but have a 20-foot setback when adjacent to a less intensive zoning district. And that is comparable to other apartment complexes as well as other multifamily building types in the code. Modification number 10 here is a few minor changes to the residential accessory uses. Currently, there is some contradiction within the accessory uses in terms of building coverage. Currently, we have a section down here at the end that says building coverage, that no detached accessory structure shall cover more than 10% of the total lot area. But we have several structures that cap that at 5%, primarily for detached garages, carports, as well as for detached storage buildings and other similar structures. And we'd like to remove that 5% cap and just make it 10% for all of those structures. But the thing to keep in mind is that 10% is limited for any accessory structure. So it's a cumulative total. So you could have a 5% detached garage and then have a 5% storage building. You couldn't have a 10% garage and a 10% storage building. But that does allow, if you want to use all of your 10% towards one detached garage, you do have that option. And then the other item that has come up before is related to the height of buildings. Currently, the height is based on the maximum height of the underlying zoning district. So in a single family zoning district, most of the height restrictions there are 35 feet. So you could have a single story 10 to 12 foot house and still have a 35-foot detached shed in the backyard. We believe that height should be limited to being no taller than the principal structure, or 16 feet, whichever is less. And that's in line with what a number of our other neighboring communities we looked at, both Lee Summit and Independence, and that is the same restriction that they have. So we feel that makes more sense to be more in line with not having accessory structures being taller than the house. And then the last section of modifications are a number of modifications to Section 404-240, which is the Downtown Development Code. The first section is related to the uses that are permitted in the Downtown Development Code. Most of this is just cleaning up that code. All the uses that are here were transferred from the former UDC, from the old UDC, but the 2015 UDC had some new use groups and that we needed to include, so we've gone ahead and just crossed all those uses out and added all the new uses based on the current list that we have. Most of the uses stay the same. Some of them have been combined. For example, we have libraries, post offices, religious assemblies, things like that have been all combined into cultural services, public government services. So we kind of cleaned up some things and just combined them to where the use and the intensity of the use are similar. But some of them did get broken out. For example, some of the retail uses, we did break those out by square footage ranges. And then we've also added down here sections FF, GG, and HH, which are related to more of the craft manufacturing. So that does include micro manufacturing and then limited food production and manufacturing, which makes sense in a downtown setting. And then we also did the same thing with the uses that are allowed by conditional use permit. We have added those. We did take out the festivals that last more than 5 days, as those are addressed elsewhere in the UDC through our temporary use requirement, so those don't need to specifically go through the Downtown Review Board or the Planning Commission for a conditional use permit on those. Next section, we're just clarifying what's allowed and what these are. So single-family houses, accessory units. Before it just said what zone it was. We wanted to clarify that these are building types. So we did that for those sections. And then the last two sections, we have a section here on parking standards. We've run into issues before with this requirement that we've crossed out that says parking lots and garages shall not front to the street. What that did was ban front-loaded garages even if they're in the rear yards. We feel that does not detract from the aesthetics of downtown by having a detached garage in the rear yard of a residential house. Even if the garage is facing the street, it's still behind the house, so it's not interrupting the streetscape. So we've updated the language to reflect that change, and also we have made an exception for surface parking on the sides of buildings. We would potentially allow that as long as it doesn't cover more than 30% of the width of the lot, and it is screened from public view by landscaping. So that is an option if, to meet the parking requirement, parking does need to be on the side of the building if they don't have any space in the rear of the building to accommodate that. And then the other condition that we've had before is that all surface parking must be set back 6 feet from the property lines. We've changed that it only has to be set back 6 feet when it's adjacent to a less intensive zoning district. So if you're in the same zoning district, you can abut right up to an adjacent parking lot. The next item there is bicycle parking. This came up at the Planning Commission when we were looking at the City Hall site plan design review, and up until now we have not had any bicycle parking requirements for downtown. The bicycle parking requirements were added to the 2015 UDC, and we didn't make any changes to the Downtown Development Code with the 2015 UDC. So since bicycle parking is allowed or is required in most parts of Blue Springs, it only makes sense to require that in downtown as well. And so with this, we are requesting to require bicycle parking for certain building types when they have certain frontages. And this would only apply to frontages where they have a setback required. So if it's, for example, the 1100 block of Main Street where the buildings are right up on the sidewalk, they would not be required to have that. But if you're an apartment building or a mixed-use building or something else where you have a front yard, then you would have a bicycle rack or something comparable to that in the front yard. And it would be based on 25% of your required parking spaces. And then the Downtown Review Board may recommend a reduction in that required bicycle parking spaces when a public bicycle rack is located within 100 feet of the primary building entrance. The Downtown Alive organization has installed a number of bicycle racks in the downtown area over the last couple of years. So if you're within 100 feet of one of those, you could request a reduction because you're already being served by a bike rack. And then the final section is related to landscaping. The current UDC references an appendix that was in the downtown master plan that was approved in 2007. That appendix was not carried over into the UDC, so we're wanting to address the items that are in there. And it limited the number of the street tree options. I think there are only about a dozen or 15 street trees that you could choose from. We would like to open that up, and much like we do with all the other sites in Blue Springs, we have a recommendation of great trees for Blue Springs that is an appendix in the comprehensive plan, and as long as they're following those guidelines, they may choose any species that they want that's listed in that. And we've also updated the street tree spacing to match or better align with the current UDC elsewhere in Blue Springs. We'd have a minimum of one small street tree per 25 feet of frontage, or one large street tree per 40 feet of frontage. And then the last item is related to the front yard plantings. Again, this is similar to the bicycle racks, where only certain frontages where they're not up on the sidewalk require front yard plantings. And this would be trees or shrubs, the number of trees or shrubs that would be permitted or required within these frontage types. In the Downtown Development Code, there are 11 frontage types, but there are only 5 of them that require front yard plantings. So rather than have a table where most of them are 0, it made more sense just to list out the 5 that do have that requirement. So those are shown there with the number of plantings that are required in the front yard setback of those. And that is all that's in the memo. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer any.
Are there any questions for Mr. Wright?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Casey.
Mr. Wright, in regards to the new restrictions for tobacconists and body art services, are there any existing businesses that are not currently complying with the 500-foot rule that we're adding here?
I don't believe we have looked at that yet. That would be something right now. If there are any that aren't complying with that, they would be legal non-conforming. So as long as they are continuing to operate, then they would still be legal non-conforming. Now, if that site were vacated after and it was not, a new license was not issued within 12 months, then they would not be allowed to reopen at that location.
Thank you.
And I will mention also, I forgot to mention that, again, with the tobacconists and body art services, the Public Safety Citizens Advisory Board did look at that and recommended staff to continue to review that and develop this at their meeting in January. And then the Development Advisory Commission also reviewed all of these modifications and amendments at their meeting on February 16th, and they did recommend approval of all of these to the Planning Commission. And then last Tuesday, February 20th, the Downtown Review Board reviewed the amendments to the Downtown Development Code, and they also recommended approval of those.
Are there other questions?
Yeah, one quick question. So, with the tobacconist, I guess, was there any discussion about making it a little bit more restrictive, since it does allow? So we have 5 right now, right? And so, with the current proposal, we could have one additional, and with another census, maybe another additional. Was there any discussion about making that more restrictive?
No, there was no additional discussion about limiting that. We kept the same numbers that have been working with for independents, so we did keep the same percentage of the population based on that.
Okay.
Commissioner?
I certainly don't want to drag this out for very long, but on the 2 tobacconists and body art, has there been any legal challenge to any of these rules in Independence or anywhere as far as, I don't know, freedom of expression or something like that with the body art, or any kind of challenge that we have to worry about going forward?
Madam Chair, I did some of the research on this, and I have not heard or seen any, at least around this area, with regards to this. As you kind of went over it a little bit quickly, but in terms of those that have such ordinances, as you can see, only Independence and Raytown really have identified that. Thanks, Matt. You can see the list at the bottom there, that a number of other cities that we looked at, comparable size and situations, are not operating any such ordinances. So this is rather new in that regard. I think Independence was from maybe 2016. Wasn't much earlier than that. So not saying there hasn't been time to process that, but I'll defer to our city attorney as well and see if she's aware of anything that she may have heard.
I'm not aware of any challenge to it.
And the ruling about not locating within 500 feet of an existing church, school, or in those rules, there's a similar type of exclusion with bars, I believe, and it's only for buildings that were originally built as churches. Does this have that same kind of specification in there? Or if somebody puts a church in the middle of a strip mall, do we then not allow any of these establishments in that strip mall?
Right, and Madam Chair, and I'll defer to our city attorney as well, but that is, I don't know if it's state or federal definition, so to speak, but we've not specified that in any of our ordinances. It's simply been more of an operational type thing under previous legal counsel stating that it would need to be originally identified or originally used as a church, like you had stated, Commissioner Billups stated. So we would assume we'd be operating the same way in this regard as well. But again, state law or federal law may dictate that. So again, with churches, there are a lot of flexibility with where they can locate. So we kind of have to look at that case by case.
So, and just trying to make sure that we're not creating a conflict somewhere.
Right, and Madam Chair as well, again, try to fashion this a little bit in the same vein as called short-term lending operations or payday loan shops, and that was 2009, I believe, is when those went into effect. We try to follow the same kind of parameters. You have a per capita, separation distances, those types of restrictions, zoning restrictions, things like that. So it wasn't just solely from Independence, but they had a really good framework that seemed to work. We also did look at our payday loan standards as well to try to make it balanced in that regard as well.
Well, if I may, I think what my question would be is that you're not going to make them move out because the church wants to go in.
No, correct. It wouldn't operate that way.
All right.
It would be the other direction.
Any other, Commissioner Fairbanks?
I had a couple of questions. First of all, I know that Seventh Heaven sells this type of product as tobacconist, and they're not listed here on your current company business types.
Yeah, we can look into that with our business services.
Yeah, because if in fact they are included, we would be at our 6 maximum right now.
Madam Chair, if I may, I believe as well, these business types, again, that's through our business licensing. So it's the primary use was identified here. This wouldn't limit, a gas station convenience store from selling cigarettes, for example, as an accessory use. I don't want to say that's how Seventh Heaven is classified, but I don't believe they are classified as a primary business type of that.
Okay.
All right. Other questions?
I had a question on the residential fencing. And I guess I'm not understanding, if you have a residential wood fence, you have to place the good side out toward your neighbor.
Correct, and that's what we're actually trying to get rid of through this. We're trying to give them an option not to face that towards their neighbor if they don't want to.
Okay.
So.
My son lives in California, and he just replaced his fence. And they have something there called good neighbor fencing, and it alternates each 6-foot panel. So,
yeah, that's a shadow box fence.
Yeah. Is that anything that you considered?
Well, you can do the shadow box fence right now if you would like to. But this has come up if you're doing just a standard privacy fence. Even with a shadow box fence, sometimes that can be very difficult to install if you're going up against another fence, because you still have to get the pickets on the other side of the construction post. And so if there's another fence there, that can be challenging to install that correctly. So that's where this comes from, is that this has been an issue, and there's been other issues. There's been other cases come up where the neighbors agree that they don't have a problem if their neighbor puts the support posts on their side. So it kind of gives them the option of constructing that how they would like, as long as it meets all other fencing standards.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? I do have one. Who's going to ensure that the home associations are going to be registered with the Secretary of State? Are you going to wait until the city has to go in and take care of some of their common area and then find out that it's not active anymore?
I may defer to our city attorney. I know we've brought that up before, especially in terms of the business licensing process and such, to ensure that these things have already gone through the state process. So,
I mean, I think realistically, it would only come up if a problem exists where the city's having to do work and perform maintenance in the subdivision. So that is a requirement, and we could look at it at any time.
Okay. And then if they haven't kept current, then you would assess each neighbor, each owner, whatever the cost would be. Is that what you're saying?
If the city has to abate maintenance issue in the common areas of the subdivision and expends money to do that, then this new code gives the city the right to divide that cost up among all of the property owners in the subdivision and bill them for it, or put it on their tax bill, which, if it's unpaid, that creates a lien against the property.
So you wouldn't actually put a lien on it, you'd wait and add it to their tax bill?
And then if the taxes are unpaid, that's a statutory lien.
Or their house payment would go up? If it's on their tax bill, then it goes to their mortgage, and then the mortgage will increase the payment. Okay, I just thought I would ask because I didn't know who the city was going to keep track of all those. And this is going to be only for going forward. It's
Correct.
not going to be retroactive back for any of the other home associations. So, okay. Just wanted to make sure, and this will only take care of the common areas like entryways, walking trails, pools, detention basins.
Yes.
Are there other questions? Commissioner Fairbanks?
Yeah. On those common areas, the subdivision that I happen to be living in, we only own the footprint of our foundation. Everything else outside of that is common area. So is that going to be included in that? Because the city is already receiving property taxes on my house. Are they going to assess a separate property tax for the common ground around my house?
Typically, in a kind of like a condominium situation, all the common areas are assessed on the individual properties, the privately owned properties. So the common area wouldn't have a taxable value, usually. I mean,
Yeah, because I
don't know
think that item 2A3 specifies payment of property taxes on all common open spaces.
I mean, occasionally they will have a value that is taxable. I used to see that every now and then when I worked for Jackson County, but that's not usually that way. It's usually a minimal value for the common area. And then the private property owners it's assessed to them. It's divided up.
Well, we just had the common area deeded over to us this past year. And at that point in time, it had zero value. But that doesn't mean that the county might decide to assess it at a higher value.
We can talk about that later if you'd like to.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Mr. Wright, I think we've had all of our questions. I'll bring it back up here. Anybody have any comments? Or all right. Since this is a public hearing, I'll ask if there's any applicants who would like to speak or witnesses in favor. Any witnesses opposed? Now, open to any general discussion. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing then. At this time, I would entertain a motion on Unified Development Code text amendment.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Billups?
I would recommend, or I would move that we recommend approval of the changes to the Unified Development Code UDCT 02186233 as presented by staff.
All right, I've had a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Commissioner Duhan? This will be a roll call.
Planning Commissioner Casey.
Aye.
Commissioner Fairbanks.
Aye.
Commissioner Peel.
Abstain.
Commissioner Sanderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Duhan.
Aye.
Commissioner Billups.
Aye.
Commissioner Haney.
Aye.
Chairman Binks.
Aye. Okay, the motion carried. That will be heard at the City Council meeting on March the 5th at 6 p.m. Item 2 is the public hearing for Southwest Park. Like I said, the applicants requested to continue to Monday, March the 12th. I would entertain a motion to continue.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Commissioner Phillips, Commissioner Peel made the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, just so everybody knows, this public hearing for Southwest Park will be on Monday, March the 12th, and we do meet at 6:30. All right, other business. I believe Mr. Allen would like to go over the review of the draft for the 2017 Planning Commission report.
Yes, indeed.
See what we've done.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members of the commission, just real briefly, this was provided to you in your packet. Hopefully you had an opportunity to review the draft report. We wanted to get any kind of feedback or additions, corrections, modifications from you tonight if we could, so we can move ahead with publishing this for public use. And first of all, great thanks to our Associate Planner Nathan Jury for putting this together yet again this year. Always does good work putting this together with maps, photos, tables, so on and so forth to make it what can be a little bit dry at times, a lot more interesting. So with that, I did want to highlight, this is the kind of a, say, executive summary, but essentially the cover letter that goes with this, addressed to you from me, but basically identifying the fact that we had exactly the same number of single-family home permits in 2017 as we did in 2016. Wow. That's kind of unusual considering it's 171, which is also quite unusual in how high that is. It's one of the largest numbers since, I believe, 2007, so just before the recession. So we continue to see a wonderful increase moving forward here. It says since 2004, I should say 2007 was the last time we had this many permits in total and applications in total as well. So Planning Commission reviewed 99 applications, missed it by 100, so almost made it. So we'll see. We'll aim for that this year, which is an increase of 22 applications over the previous year. So some of the tables near the end of the report, I can jump to that if you'd like, but near the end of the report, kind of point a lot of that out a little bit more interestingly than what you see here. One thing to note, I'm trying to jump to that here. Overshot it, just a moment. Here's some maps of the rezonings. But we had the One Unified Development Code amendment last year. Again, we try to look at this 1 to 2 times per year, so thank you for indulging us again this evening with the previous item. So this just is a highlight of what was done. It was last August. So we're on track. About every 6 months or so, we look to come back to you to see if there are any amendments, modifications that need to occur with the UDC in particular. Let's see if I can get it right here. Here we go. So what is a little bit impressive is to show, just to kind of scan through here, not going to go through all these one by one, obviously, but you can see all the different preliminary plats that were heard last year, 2 pages worth, 18 of them, and 22 final plats last year. So again, 2 full pages of those as well. That's what I wanted to show in particular here. Again, breaking it down by residential, commercial, had some civic as well related to City Hall and, or actually Baumgartner Park with the Centennial Poolplex there. But just wanted to let you know, kind of again, just the amount of work that you all did as well. So thanks to staff, but also equal and greater thanks to all of you as well, volunteering your time here over the last year, and again yet this year, to make all these projects happen and go through the process so that they can start being constructed here in Blue Springs. So that's why we wanted to point out single-family home permits, but just permits in general. I believe we had 228 total residential units, and again, even more, we had 1,200 plus permits as a whole. But just want to point out the fact that what you do here has a real impact in a positive way on the whole community. So thank you as well for everything you've done. And what this also points out is all these final plats mean that many more permits coming down the line as well, and that much more happening out on the ground and coming out of the ground throughout the city. So again, what you do here kind of opens the door to what you see out throughout the community. So I'll leave it with that. If you had any corrections or modifications, we can go through those individually, but if you just notice some typos or things like that, please pass it along to Karen or to me here tonight. We can incorporate those into kind of a final draft, final version here yet this week, and try to get this out to everybody and onto the website and passed around otherwise here hopefully yet this week again.
Anyone have anything for Mr. Allen? I would like to say the more we work, the more you work. And I want to thank our city staff for all the excellent work you do for us.
Thank you. It's a real team effort. This shows that very clearly, I believe. So, thank you.
So thank you very much, too. Okay. Now, final business is, does
Yes.
anybody have any other?
Madam Chair, I do to walk
Okay.
through the agenda, if I may, just real
Sure.
briefly for the next
Go
meeting. Again, just to show you what you're going to be,
Should
what
we
the
know?
2018 annual report will start to look like.
Okay.
Again, next meeting, Monday, March 12th, we do have a number of public hearings, quite a bit related to what had been called Project Turtle, which is now Forcia, as you're aware, the auto manufacturing project that's going out near Kohl's Distribution Center. So they'll be coming forward with all their approvals for different applications. So that'll be the real heavy lift, so to speak, at the next meeting. We do have a number of other items I wanted to highlight. One of those is, just going in order here, with public hearings again first, try to put those first. Conditional use permit for, it's called Blue Springs Customs, which is some detailing and additional kind of customization work for Blue Springs Ford. They're utilizing another facility, another property on South Outer Road. So they're looking to get a conditional use permit to do kind of their, what Mr. Wright had mentioned earlier, some additional vehicle use, vehicle repair, so to speak. It's not really repair as much as kind of customization. So if Madam Chair, if you want to get your brand new Ford F-150 a lift kit and run and neon,
Give me a Ford, get it
yeah,
for me
neon
first.
lit running boards and things, this is the place to go. So that's where they're coming forward. So when you see Blue Springs Customs, you're wondering what that means. It's related to Blue Springs Ford and the work they do there. Same with 3400 Southwest Liggett Road. That's a vacation. Wondering what that is. This is the location for that. Looking at modifying building setback line. This is something we're looking to transition. Thanks to Mr. Mallon for pointing that out as well, trying to eliminate all these hard and fast building lines that some developers put on the final plats, especially these older plats. So when we make modifications to the UDC that perhaps are a little bit more generous to a property owner for building setback lines, we have to go with the more restrictive, which is the final plat, the recorded document, and that's the case here too. So somebody who wants to do an expansion or addition to their property can't meet setbacks, or they can meet setbacks for the city's code, but they can't for their own plat. So we're trying, that's the reason for the vacation here. So again, rezoning, site plan design review, preliminary plat, and final plat for Forcia, which was called Project Turtle. The Southwest Park, again, will get back before you, hopefully, for their rezoning public hearing, as well as preliminary plat and final plat for that city property. Also have some final plats for Four Pillars, another phase of that, and the Coronado Holdings preliminary plat, which is the Calamar Senior Living, just east of the golf course off Coronado Drive before it turns back into Artie Mines Road over there. So a lot of variety, several public hearings, and I'm sure Karen will bring some snacks and such to keep us going along before March 12th. So again, thank you all for your dedication. It's evidence here in the annual report, and I think we'll be seeing even a bigger annual report here for 2018. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, make sure everybody shows up. All right.
Madam Chair.
Is there any other business? Mr. Casey?
I just wanted to make sure the commission knew about something that was going to be going on in our town next week. Yesterday I spoke with a young leader in our community named Nadia. Nadia is a student at Paul Kinder Middle School. And she and her peers have organized with the support of their administration, they've organized a school walkout for March 7th. That's next Wednesday, I believe, at 10 a.m. And just speaking with her, she was very bright and just very mature beyond her years, and it was really a pleasure to speak with her about this issue that she clearly cares quite a bit about. That was just very, this is something I really wanted to commend here publicly, just these emerging young people. So I asked her what we could be doing to help support her, and she asked that anybody interested in supporting her cause go out to their change.org petition. It's titled Safer Schools. And I believe as of today, they had over 2,800 signatures already. I think they're shooting for 5,000. So any help we can get to get them there would be great. And then, in addition to that, any parents, students, faculty members that are interested in participating with Nadia and her peers can do that at their own school as well on March 7th.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Commissioner Duhon, do I have a
I'll
second?
it. I'll second.
Commissioner Fairbanks, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, meeting's adjourned.